8 mice entered a world with abundant food, water, shelter, and no predators. The colony still collapsed. Online, that becomes a prophecy. Comfort destroys society. But the box had walls no mouse could leave. It had social bottlenecks, repeated forced contact, and no option to choose a different community. Even the word paradise hides half the experiment. Universe 25 was real. The viral conclusion is not the experiment. So we are rebuilding the enclosure, the population curve, and the claims attached to it. By the end, we will know what the mouse Utopia showed, what Calhoun believed it meant, and what it cannot tell us about you. On July 9, 1968, researcher John Calhoun introduced 4 pairs of 48-day-old albino mice from an inbred laboratory strain. Their universe was a square enclosure a little over 2.5 meters on each side. Its walls contained 16 repeated cells with vertical tunnels and stacked nest boxes. Food hoppers, water bottles, nesting paper, controlled shelter, and protection from predators were built into the design. Calhoun estimated that food access would not become limiting below 9,500 mice. Water access was designed for more than 6,000. The 256 nest retreats implied a resting capacity of roughly 3,840 mice. The actual population never reached any of those numbers. This is the strongest part of the Utopia label. Obvious material scarcity was deliberately pushed away. But supplied resources are not the same thing as unlimited choices. The enclosure was also physically closed. Calhoun called that emigration prevention. A mouse losing a conflict could not disperse into a new territory, find another population, or permanently leave the social system. Every route eventually returned it to the same finite network. All 16 cells looked similar, but the mice did not use them evenly. At peak population, Calhoun reported that roughly 20% of nest sites were usually unoccupied. Some food areas became crowded while equivalent resources elsewhere remained quieter. So total capacity and lived access were already different measurements. Later crowding research would make a similar distinction between physical density and the experience of unwanted contact. Universe 25 did not isolate comfort as a single variable. It combined abundance with enclosure, social competition, fixed architecture, and no true exit. For the first 104 days, the original 8 mice adjusted before the first litters appeared. Then the population doubled about every 55 days. 20 became 40, 40 became 80, and the curve climbed through 620 mice by day 315. Calhoun called this rapid expansion Phase B. But the births were not spread evenly around the enclosure. Some brood groups produced many young, while others produced almost none. Dominant territorial males were associated with the most productive groups. By the end of this phase, Calhoun counted about 150 adults organized across 14 social groups. Hundreds of younger mice were approaching maturity behind them. The population still had food, water, and empty nest boxes. What it was running out of was not calories, but an easy way to enter the existing social order. That last sentence is an interpretation of Calhoun's observations, not a variable he cleanly measured by itself. After day 315, the doubling time stretched from roughly 55 days to about 145. This was Phase C, the stagnation phase. Maturing males repeatedly tested territories already controlled by established adults. Some unsuccessful males withdrew toward the center floor and became unusually inactive. Calhoun observed wounds among these withdrawn animals and attacks that could spread through the pooled group. Territorial defense also weakened as established males faced more challengers. That left nesting females more exposed to repeated intrusions. Some females became more aggressive, including toward their own young. Calhoun reported declining conception, disrupted maternal behavior, abandoned young, and increasing loss before weaning. These are disturbing observations, so our visuals will remain schematic and non-graphic. They describe one population inside one design. They do not demonstrate that material comfort automatically produces violence or neglect. The phrase behavioral sink is often used as if it meant the entire colony collapsing from density. In Calhoun's figure caption, it describes something more specific. Mice crowded particular food sites even when other equivalent hoppers were available. Proximity to other mice had become a learned attraction strong enough to distort resource use. The pattern mattered because architecture did not determine behavior by capacity alone. Identical facilities produced unequal traffic, unequal social positions, and unequal reproductive success. At the population peak of about 2,200 mice on day 560, the enclosure was below its stated material capacities. Yet the social map was already highly uneven. Calling it pure overcrowding is too simple. Calling it pure loss of purpose is also too simple. The evidence shows an interaction between animals, development, distribution, and a closed environment. Population growth stopped abruptly around day 560. A few mice born before day 600 survived weaning. After that, pregnancies declined quickly and no new young survived. Calhoun placed the last conception around day 920. The population then became an aging group with no replacement generation. Among the late-born males, he identified animals he called the beautiful ones. They showed little fighting or courtship and spent much of their time eating, drinking, sleeping, and grooming. Because they avoided conflict, their coats carried few wounds or scars. The nickname makes them sound like a lifestyle category. In the paper, they were a behavioral description inside a collapsing mouse colony. Turning them into a diagnosis of quiet young men, dating culture, or people who care about appearance is not evidence. It is a metaphor added decades later. Calhoun himself encouraged the larger interpretation. His paper opened by saying he would speak about mice while thinking about humanity, healing, life, and evolution. He described a first death of complex social behavior, followed by the second death of the body. He argued that reduced mortality could fill available social roles faster than new animals could occupy them successfully. Young mice developing inside that disruption, he believed, failed to acquire the complex behavior needed for reproduction and care. This was Calhoun's theoretical conclusion. It was not a neutral readout from a censor. The paper also included direct human speculation and dramatic religious language. That made the story memorable, portable, and unusually easy to turn into a prophecy. It also made the boundary between mouse observation and human analogy dangerously easy to miss. The viral version compresses the experiment into 4 steps. The mice received everything. Comfort removed struggle. Purpose disappeared. Society died. Each arrow hides a missing test. There was no comparison enclosure that changed comfort while holding exits, architecture, population history, genetics, and social structure constant. There was no human group randomly assigned to a mouse universe. There was no measurement of purpose in the modern psychological sense. And the enclosure was not everything a mouse could need, it was everything the experimenter chose to supply. That is why a dramatic narrative can be emotionally true to Calhoun's fear while still overstating what the design established. When researchers examined human crowding, results were inconsistent. Physical density did not reliably produce one universal social pathology. Privacy, control, relationships, inequality, culture, architecture, and the ability to leave could change the experience. Humans also build institutions, rules, technology, and what Calhoun called conceptual space. We reorganize groups instead of waiting for one fixed social map to fill. That does not mean crowding stress is imaginary. It means density, forced contact, lack of control, and social isolation are not interchangeable variables. A packed concert chosen with friends is not the same condition as an overcrowded cell. A small apartment with privacy is not the same condition as a nest route that strangers repeatedly invade. And a generation using social media is not a colony of inbred laboratory mice sealed inside a metal square. Universe 25 can suggest questions about social design. It cannot answer them for us without human evidence. Now we can replace the slogan with a defensible answer. Universe 25 followed one genetically restricted mouse population in a closed, resource-rich, architecturally fixed environment. It documented rapid growth, uneven social organization, disrupted development and care, reproductive failure, and terminal population decline. It supports the idea that removing food scarcity does not remove every important constraint. It suggests that distribution, control, development, repeated contact, and social organization deserve separate attention. It does not prove that comfort destroys purpose. It does not prove that cities, welfare, low birth rates, dating apps, or Gen Z are replaying the enclosure. The strongest lesson is methodological. When a story claims one cause, inspect what the experiment changed at the same time. When a habitat is called paradise, ask who can leave, who controls space, and which choices never existed. The mice did not fail a test of happiness. They lived through a closed social experiment whose variables were tangled together. That is less prophetic than the meme and more useful than the moral. The internet remembers Universe 25 because one image can make an entire society feel explainable. Real evidence usually makes the image more complicated. If you want the evidence behind strange everyday stories, subscribe to Oddly Evident. Next, we will shrink the boundary from a whole enclosure to one ordinary doorway. Why can crossing into another room make the thing you wanted suddenly harder to retrieve? For Universe 25, remember the hidden variable. Paradise had walls.